Welcome to my channel, and here's a quick comparison of the Grand Seiko Killer, the Citizen High Accuracy Quartz, and against, well, the real thing, a Seiko Grand Seiko. So some of the comparisons that they really are extremely similar watches. As you can see, the date window on both of them have the exact same border. The font also is the same. One of my subscribers said that the date window on the date number on the Citizen was a little smaller than the one on the Grand Seiko, and the person is right. But you have to also understand that the Citizen is a much smaller watch. So if you were to look at the dimensions of the Citizen, we're really talking 37.5, whereas the Grand Seiko is about 39.5. So yeah, it makes sense that the date window would be proportionately smaller. Similarly, when you look at the bracelet, you would realize that the Citizen bracelet is about, at the thickest point, is about 3.5 millimeters. Let's do that again. Yes, it's about 3.2 millimeters. Whereas the Grand Seiko bracelet is much thicker. This is 3.6, say 3.5. So yes, that is one clear difference that I personally am a little annoyed about. I wish the Citizen bracelet were more substantial, but as anyone knows, one thing about Grand Seikos is that bracelets are probably the best bracelets that money can buy. Any Patek Philippe or Audemars Piguet or you name it, any of these companies, Breguet, none of them can really have, nobody has bracelets, Rolex, Omega, nobody really has bracelets of the quality that a Grand Seiko bracelet has. So I think it's a little unfortunate that the Citizen bracelet is thinner than I would like it to be. Now let's look at the clasp. As you can see, both these watches have been worn, and I have to admit that the Citizen bracelet is beginning to show its age. On the other hand, the Grand Seiko bracelet is still looks like new after almost, how old is this watch? This is from 2006. So yeah, after almost 16 years, this watch still looks like new. So that really says a lot. Yeah, and that's one thing that you have to remember, that this is a 16-year-old Grand Seiko. This is from 2006 when this model was first released. It was quite very rare to get Grand Seikos in those days. And just as it is very rare to get these Citizen high accuracy quartz these days. So in some ways, a Citizen high accuracy quartz, buying a Citizen HAQ these days is essentially the same thing as buying a Grand Seiko in 2005. Nobody around you would have carried a Grand Seiko because everybody thought Seiko was basically the manufacturer of, watches like this simple Seiko diver. And people just could not associate that, really they could not imagine that a Grand Seiko watch would be miles ahead of their Swiss competition. And these days the Citizen, in terms of finishing, is really the same thing as a Grand Seiko, but without the price tag. Let me polish this a little bit. Now, the point about polishing really raises that what some people really like is the Zaratsu polish on both the Citizen and the Grand Seiko. And if you've seen my older videos, you would realize that after 15, 20 years, Zaratsu polishing doesn't really look that great. Zaratsu polishing looks very good when you get it out of a showroom. It looks very good when you look at a watch on someone else's review. But when you wear it, trust me, a Zaratsu polished watch or a non-Zaratsu polished watch, they really look the same on day-to-day usage. let's look at the crown on both of these watches. And I know I've made this point earlier that the Citizen is HAQ, the AS model that this is. Often you will also find these at the Chronomaster, but the Chronomaster is actually a model that's actually one rung below this particular model. And the evidence of that can be seen in the fact that this comes with a signed crown, whereas the Chronomaster does not come with a signed crown. In terms of the quality of the crown, the Grand Seiko and the Citizen have almost the same quality. The Citizen obviously looks a lot more refined because it's much newer than the Grand Seiko, but I would say they really match for, qualitatively wise, they are the same watch. Obviously, the Citizen is much slimmer than the Grand Seiko. This has a quartz movement, this has a spring drive. Any automatic rotor always takes depth, and that's just, harder to implement. In terms of finishing of the hands, it's not really a fair comparison because the Grand Seiko has completely polished hands, whereas the Citizen has a combination of brushed and polished. The brushed and polished on the Citizen actually gives it more of a shine because it catches the light more intensely, whereas the Grand Seiko just reflects a lot of light, but they really are very similar. The one place where I think the Citizen fails has to do with I wish they had an applied Citizen logo. I can't understand why they insisted on printing the logo, the Citizen logo. So the Seiko's always had applied logos, and I personally think applied logos just look more premium. Similarly, with the Citizen Eagle, that's how you know this is a premium Citizen. I wished the Citizen Eagle were a bit more flatter. The edges look a bit rounded, so makes you get a sense that it's I would like to compare it, say, with the GS logo that you see. It's just flat and reflects the light in a much more direct way than, say, the Citizen Eagle. It's just I just think it just looks, I wish it were a bit more refined, that Citizen Eagle logo there. Now on the flip side, the Citizen Eagle logo on the case back, that is just as high quality as the Grand Seiko lion on the case back. I had raised this point earlier that I wish the Grand Seiko lion were aligned with the axis of the watch, the way Citizen managed to align the eagle along with the axis of the watch. That really goes to show the level of attention and detail that Citizen puts into its premium watches. I am kind of bothered that the bracelet has been rubbing against my clasp, and that doesn't really make me very happy. It's not something I would expect because, seriously, after almost 16 years, this bracelet has no marks. So I can't understand why in less than a year this bracelet starts having these polishing, these where it rubs against the metals, rubbing against the satin finish. So that's a little aggravating that, I want it to be as polished as a Grand Seiko is polished. And that's really why a Grand Seiko is what it is. It's just the best watch money can buy. The one place where there are the places where Citizen does beat the Grand Seiko in finish. One is definitely the crystal. Grand Seikos have very nice crystals, but because the Citizen chose to use a flat crystal, it just disappears on certain angles. So really from most angles, you don't even see the crystal because the combination of the anti-reflective coating and the flat crystal means the crystal just disappears, which means you really start seeing those reflections of the faceted polished hands. Same with the Grand Seiko, but I think the shallow dome does tend to reflect light a little bit more. In terms of lugs, again, it's just a factor of the size of the watch. The Citizen, the Grand Seiko obviously has more prominent lugs, which, and for a 2000, mid 2000s design, this prominent lug design is still looks very contemporary. The Citizen, on the other hand, has a much thinner lug, and I think it gives it a more delicate look, but it just doesn't gel very well because this almost unibody tonneau shape that this has, like a GS44, is just, I think kind of detracts from uh, the heft of the case. But I just don't know how with such a small watch you could do anything different, because you still have to work with the strap, that's the bracelet that's on this watch. I believe this is 18 millimeter. Let me quickly check. And yes, it is 18 millimeter. Is it 18? Actually, no, it is 19. So I stand corrected. So that's a 19 millimeter bracelet. I think the Seiko is also 19 millimeter. So both of these have 19 millimeter bracelets. And I know there are some people who don't like the 19 millimeter bracelet size, but for these kind of dress watches, I just wear them with their original bracelet. They come with such high quality bracelets that I don't really see the point in changing the bracelet on this watch. So the bracelet is just what it is. The one thing that does, again, annoy me a little bit has to do with the size of this crown. It's just the fluting is kind of I wish they were smaller. The Grand Seiko fluting is obviously much easier on the fingers. But having said that, remember, with the Citizen, you never need to adjust the time on this. So it's kind of a moot point how the crown feels in the hand, because you don't really adjust the crown on a Citizen. Let me think, is there any other point that I need to touch upon? The satin finish on the bracelets, I actually think they're very, very similar. If anything, I think the Seiko has it's not fair to say, because the Seiko is a 16-year-old watch. This is less than a year old. But I do think the Seiko bracelet is truly exceptional. I have a feeling the Citizen bracelet would not look as good as the Seiko bracelet has done after the years. You can see there's a pretty nice scratch there. And that's great. Watches are meant to be worn. In fact, the first thing you should do when you get a watch is just go ahead and scratch it up a bit, because, the whole point of a watch is to wear it. There is nothing as annoying as somebody who buys a watch and then does not wear it. Anyway, so that's just a very quick comparison. Nothing else that I can think of. I guess I should give you the thickness of these watches. This is about 10.5. My spring drive is, including, that's about 12.5. So yeah, 2 millimeters thicker. But you have to understand, I am taking the raised logo at the back, which does add a little bit, because both of these are raised. Except the Citizen is actually recessed into the crown, so it reduces the thickness just that much. In conclusion, it just doesn't matter. Each of these watches is exceptional. If you want to show off, maybe you should buy the Grand Seiko. If you don't want to show off, buy the Citizen. But if you really want to show off, you probably are better off buying, an Omega or a Rolex. I think the Rolex is actually an inferior watch to a Grand Seiko, but the market prices seem to be proving me otherwise. So just buy a watch that makes you happy. It doesn't matter what watch you get. But if you really had the money to spend, and you were torn between a Citizen HAQ and a Grand Seiko, I would say go with the Citizen, but it just doesn't matter which one you go with. Both are equally good. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you for subscribing to the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you.